artisanal works to get into the medium scale and the large scale stuff. Why is mercury mining so popular? Dr. Suresh covered most of this. It's a very simplistic form. Mercury is added to the salt, the gold bonds to it, you get a gold mercury amalgam. This amalgam is then removed from the remaining salt by either gravity or a sluice system, and then it's heated to remove the two elements from each other. So it's a relatively cheap way to go into it. I'm not going to go into the chemical part of it too much because it's not really important for this presentation. But there are obvious problems with it. We described the health risks and the wildlife risks. It's an element that does not remove itself from the circuit. It stays forever. It changes forms, and the buildup is enormous. The No Mercury Treaty, I'm sure many of you are aware of it, and countries around the world now are trying to phase out this mercury production with a realistic solution. Not only are there health and wildlife risks, there are also recovery risks involved, what we call metallurgical thieves. Mercury recovery relies on concentration where there must be direct contact between the mercury and the gold. Now, if you're looking at 2 grams a ton head grade, for example, you have to have mercury in contact with the gold. Now, there's 2 ways to do that. Either have a hell of a lot of gold in your ore, which isn't going to happen, or a lot of mercury in it. And the way to recover that then is, on the artisanal scale, is enormous vats filled with mercury, and then the product just being stirred around and around. That is then gravity recovered and burnt off. Another issue with this is that if there's any other chemicals in the process, you get bond interference, and your mercury doesn't actually stick to the gold. So the recoveries are immediately hampered, not only from the perspective that you have to use a sluicing system or whatever up front, but also now that the recovery process itself is flawed. Again, I know Dr. Suresh covered this, but this is just the biogeochemical mercury cycle. You can see that most of the time it will be in various forms. It goes through oxidation and deposition, goes through various stages until it reaches methyl mercury, and that is where the danger comes in. So you can see it changes forms and doesn't leave the system for many, many years. So, as I said earlier, you can't take away the livelihood of someone. You negatively affect their families, you negatively affect their income, and you negatively affect the economy as a whole. So we need to come up with a solution to concentrate gold, to purify gold, and to recover more gold overall that is financially viable for people on the ground. Our solution to this is what is known as the gold catcher. It's a very simplistic centrifugal concentrator. It was developed in collaboration with Nelson concentrators to be an entry-level, small-scale artisanal concentrator. It runs off of 0.75 kilowatts on motor. That machine there can process between 1.5 and 3 tons an hour, depending on the ore that you're feeding. Obviously, there's a large amount of hard rock that has to be scooped off and taken off the top. But if you've got very small, fine, what is now tailings or sand, you could process almost 2.5 to 3 tons an hour. It produces around about 8 to 10 kilograms of concentrate when you wash out the ribs. It's a manual process, you can understand that. This machine here costs $5,500 with a petrol motor. It gives you a little wheelbarrow and a bucket and a spade. And that is a mine. There's no shortcut around it. You are mining at 1.5 tons an hour. All you need is a pan to pan the concentrates. We have various financial models that we produce to predict mining on various scales. We go right from this 1.5 ton an hour module. We've got a 20 ton an hour, 80 ton an hour, 250 ton an hour. And the one with the highest IRR is 4 of these gold catchers in a row with a Gemini table. That produces an IRR of 1,000%. Now, I know you might find that hard to believe, but if you just do the maths with me, let's say we're recovering, worst case scenario, 50% of the gold. Okay, we have a head grade of 2 grams. We're doing 10 tons a day. All right, so we've got 1 gram recovered at, what's the gold price now, $45 a kilo. Let's say 50 for argument's sake. You're doing 50 times 10, you're doing $500 a day. For 10 days, you've paid this machine off in, let's say, 15 with operating costs. So 15 days, you've paid off this machine. Now, the rest of the year is profit. This thing doesn't break. It's got only one moving part, which is the motor and the pulley. So it's a centrifugal concentrator that's also robust. It's portable. It only weighs, I think, 150 to 200 kilos. I'm not sure. It is deployed on site within a matter of minutes. You just pull the starter motor and then you have a concentrator. This is just a little video. I hope it works. We had to change computers here. Yeah, there you go. You can see the relative size to a vehicle. They are used now throughout Africa. We've sold over 1,000 of these machines already throughout Africa. In southern Sudan, they are using it extensively to phase out the mercury process, and the government themselves has ordered 1,200 to be delivered over the period of the next 2 years. Very simple machine, centrifugal bowl at the bottom, it's loaded at the top. You just add water to the system, run about 50% solids, 30 to 50% solids depending on the ore. The concentrator looks almost exactly like a Nelson inside. It's got riffles. It does not have the fluidization bed, which means it's about 15 times cheaper. All the oversize above 3 millimeters is taken off. You can then add modules onto that. The whole idea behind this process system is that as you have more money, you can grow into the next stage. So if there is value in your hard rock, you merely add a crushing system and then refeed the system again. Once the system is run for anywhere between 40 minutes to an hour, that's up to you. You then drain out the concentrate out of the bottom by pulling out the plug. System is then washed off. You just use a pipe. You just pull out the plug and wash the concentrate through. It's almost a manual version of the Nelson's discharge cycle, purge cycle. The concentrate is washed down, it's about 8 to 10 kilograms. If it's economically viable, you can add a Gemini shaking table. I don't know how many people have ever seen a Gemini shaking table. This concentrator can catch gold right down to 35 micron. Having a look at we were in Omai last week commissioning one of our 20 ton an hour modules. And having a look at the plate size of the gold, I would say the P80 of that region is around about 100 micron. So well within the region of the gold banks. Bigger the gold, the easier it is to catch, obviously. And then it becomes down to economics issue. Do you go as far as saying, right, I need to add now a crushing circuit? Do I need to go as far as a cyanidation or a flotation circuit? Because once again, mining is a business. And if you are spending too much money on your capital outlay and your recoveries, let's say we're getting 97% recovery, but it's costing us 95% of our recovery to get there, what are you doing? You know, dollar per percent, capital outlay per percentage recovered is one of the most important numbers in the industry. If you are spending too much to get back your dollar, you are doing it incorrectly. Sorry for that. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The very important thing about these systems is that the gold that is there is visible. Okay, it's free gold. Guyana doesn't have much sulfide-occluded gold, which is a fantastic thing, which in Africa causes enormous amount of problems for cyanidation as well as gravity recoverable gold. You do have a lot of black sands though, but once you put them on a shaking table or in a concentrate pan, it's easy to disseminate between the two. We have various versions of these. I'm not sure if Mahindra, there is one here today. If you want to have a look at it later, it's outside the back there. A very simplistic machine, it stands about chest high. The feed rate is just with a bucket, the feed method is just with a bucket, and the water that it uses is about 50-50. So you'll use about 1.5 cubic meters of water an hour. The other uses for this machine, people have also mined mercury areas to get rid of the mercury because mercury's SG is higher than the coarse gangue around it. The sluice concentrate reduction, so if people are using sluicing systems, they can do one of two things. One, put it on the tailings because sluices will not catch the fine gold, whereas centrifugal concentrator will. Given the size of the fine gold that you get here in Guyana, I'm hearing numbers of only 50% recovery on a sluice. So a lot of your gold is still in suspension when it goes off the other side. There are systems that exist in the world that rely completely on suspension, such as sand systems, and the idea behind it is that very fine stuff floats. And that exact same philosophy applies to a sluice, whereby you're catching the heavy nuggets that sit on the base, and all the finer stuff will just go off the other side. So you can do one of two things. You can add the concentrator to the tailings, or you can add the concentrator to the concentrate itself that comes from the sluice to reduce it from a, let's say for example, 200 kilo sample down to a 10 kilo sample through various cycles. So you just fill it up and run it and then clean it out. And then finally, it's used for exploration work, for resource qualification. It's very mobile, so you just throw it on the back of a truck, go and pan up for an hour or so and see how much you get out of it. And that gives you, let's not say a indicative number, but it gives you sort of a rough view of whether or not there's gold in the area. These machines are also used as the first stage in the modular growth to the next phase. So it goes 1.5 tons an hour, 3 tons an hour, 10 tons an hour, 20, 80, 100. And I'll speak a little bit more about that after the break. I've got a presentation on the modular growth patterns that we follow. So it just gives you a means to be able to quantify a resource and see whether or not it's there. And also, it could be your final solution to your mining. I found the gold now, and I'm leaving my gold catcher right here. I'll put 2 or 3 next to it if I need to, and I'm basically mining by the end of the day. This idea of centrifugal concentrators and concentrators is a good one in terms of financial emphasis and environmental effects. The concentrator doesn't use any chemical systems, so the idea that you could do this on an artisanal scale means that you also have responsible mining right up. So all the way from the 10 ton an hour through to the 250 ton an hour. Once we go to that stage, we use Nelson concentrators in our systems, and that just allows you to get the free gold immediately out of the system, and also free gold is cheap gold. The processing costs of such a system, for example, if you want to do 20 tons an hour, it will cost you about $450,000 for a 20 ton an hour unit. At a cyanidation module that does 20 ton an hour, you're looking about $1.6 million extra for only a 10% extra recovery. So if you're doing about 60% of your gold as free gold for for $500,000, and you're doing 10% for $1.5 million, where's your financial cutoff? I'm not saying that cyanidation does not use it. We produce our own cyanidation modules. It's just a very close view from an economic perspective must be applied to a system to realize whether or not the financial impetus to go to the next stage is there. Smart thinking through business is a way to make sure that your mine produces money, because we're not there to make gold, we're there to make dollars. Gold doesn't feed little kids, money does. So make sure we understand that impetus and that idea. Then finally, that's just the ranges of the Nelson. You can see the very big one back is a QS70. If anyone in Guyana gets to that stage, phone me, and I'd love to have a chat with you. That machine can do about 1,000 tons an hour. And then this is the concentrate upgrade table. I don't think the video is working because I didn't transfer it over. Very simple system. It relies on a banked table with riffles down it. We took some of the GGMC people to see it last week in Omai. What it does is it uses a shaking table with grooves, and as the table shakes, the heavy gold will always be left towards the center as it's the heaviest, and the finer material will go off the side. You'll see there on the top left corner is the final product into the basin. There are 6 pods. You get tailings, middlings, and concentrate, and from that you can get smeltable gold. And once it comes out of the smelter, your purities run about 95 to 97%. So absolutely no chemical process is necessary, and you have what is known as a smeltable system that is usable without any environmental issues. Just want to see if the video works. No. Okay, I'll show it to you later. All right, thank you. Any questions?
For the cost of the 5,000.
Costs about $5,000 US.
Right.
If the flow rate of a 6-inch drudge is about 120 cubic meters per hour, which is the average flow rate, and the operator works for, let's say, 8 to 10 hours a day, what you mentioned is that you are able to process 1.5 ton in a day with this? An hour. 1.5 ton of solids, or is it slurry? Solids.
1.5 tons of solids an hour.
An hour.
Up to, if you're using a sluicing system, you're going to have a very fine particulate PST. Let's say your PAT of that will probably be about, I guess, 500 micron. They're coming out of the riverbed. That's just a rough guess. So then the machine can handle a lot more of it because you don't have coarse gang in there. So you could go almost up to 3 tons an hour. I have loaded one of these machines on very fine particles to 4 tons an hour, but the recoveries obviously then reduce. So 2.5 to 3 tons an hour is easily doable.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that can we connect up these machines? That's what you're saying. You can connect them like in series so that
absolutely. They're completely modular. You can see each one is driven by its own drive. So what they've done is sequential versions of it. And not only then, you can take, let's say for example, you start off and you need to take 1/10 of your sluice tailings, depending on the size of the sluice.
Yeah.
Biggest problem with sluices is that they are only lifting about 30% solids.
Yes.
Would you agree
Right.
with that? So a lot of your energy is going into picking up water and dumping it back in the river
Yeah.
again. All right. From a recovery perspective, it's more ideal to go to a higher solid base, around
Yeah.
about 50, 55, 45%,
Okay.
because then your material particulate interaction is such that your flow from the heavy particulates to the outside is a lot more amenable, and you don't just get all your gang in the end, in the riffles, and
Yeah.
all the water in the center. So the more gang you have, the more of a slurry you can create, and you can actually disseminate between particles of material rather than particles of water and material.
Okay.
All right. So yes, you can put it in series. Let's say you treat, for example, 10% of the tailings and you like what you see. You put on another one and another one and another one. Or you just put on a Nelson. If you have enough capital expenditure, you just put a Nelson straight onto the tailings. Nelson's on tailings is a big issue now with Nelson themselves. They are looking to do those projects as well with us. Biggest problem is the hydro. You have to hydrocyclone the tailings before you put it through the Nelson for optimum recovery. There's no reason you can't put the whole tailings through. If you're running 30% solids, you can put the entire tailings through a Nelson. It'll behave perfectly well.
Okay. And what would be the flow rate that can go into the Nelson? How
Well,
much?
that biggest one can take 1,000 tons an hour, but it's
Okay.
also got a fat price tag on it. So it's
And that
becoming
costs?
economies. The costs of the Nelsons vary. I'm not going to give you any real numbers here. I don't know what the guy-on prices are on freight.
Okay.
But for example, a CD20, which can do about 30 tons of solids an hour, I think it's in the region of about $150,000.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan.
I think it's a very nice system. I think you want to be really careful not to throw out the kinds of numbers you did unless you're going to give us parameters. So I understand you're selling them, and I understand you have to represent them very well. But when you start making broad comparisons between what it would be for cyanidation versus capital costs, you've got to look at the particle sizes of the particular ore that you look at. You've got to look at the size, the processing throughput, and everything else before you throw out a number like that. So we like your system. It's very interesting, but don't oversell it. Thank you.
Are there any more questions out there? For clarity, Dr. Warren?
Is it 1 to 3 tons per hour that gives you a concentrate of 8 to 10 kgs per hour? The unit of time is not stated.
Correct, 1 hour.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just gonna elaborate on that. It's the same system with the Nelson as well. Your run